Hey everybody, welcome back to Amplify Your Garden. This week we're going to be discussing some of the essential garden tools that you'll need when starting a garden, and then also some of the tools that you don't necessarily need but are nice to have. So let's start with the tools that you'll need to start your garden. Start with the garden preparation tools. So those are things like your shovel or your spade, a nice just standard hoe, a gravel rake or a leaf rake to help level out the soil. And then also, once you have plants in your garden, you're going to need a way to get water to them. Whether that's just a standard hose with a sprinkler or a watering can, something to transport that water from the faucet outside to the garden. Something else that you might need if you're putting tomatoes out is some kind of support system for your tomatoes. So that could be going out and getting some tomato cages. Could be making your own support system for your tomatoes, but it's important to have that support for the tomato plants to keep the tomatoes off the ground so they don't deteriorate while they're on the ground. Another thing that is helpful if you need it is fertilizers. There are just blanket basic fertilizers that are an option. If you feel you need to get fertilizer based on a soil test, that is something else that is helpful to have when starting a garden. Lastly, something that is needed for a garden is some kind of cutting device to help cut your produce off the plant. So things like tomatoes and peppers do not need a cutting device because they easily snap off, but other things such as zucchini or pumpkins, it's helpful to have a knife or sharp pruners to cut that fruit off the plant. So now we'll get into the items that are nice to have but you don't necessarily need to have. So some things that are not necessarily needed there are garden tools like a rototiller and different types of hoes that are helpful to get the garden started. I really like my rototiller, and then there are two types of hoes that I personally really like. One is a ridging hoe and one is an oscillating hoe. So the ridging hoe helps to dig those trenches a little bit nicer than just a standard hoe, and an oscillating hoe is nice for weeding. So an oscillating hoe, you can just pull it back and forth to grab those weeds and cut their roots off. It's a little bit easier to use than just a standard hoe. Some other things that are helpful when putting out a garden are hand shovel and gloves. So that hand shovel is nice when you're transplanting plants, just to make a quick little hole, drop your transplant in, and move on. The gloves are nice if you have plants with thorns or have weeds with thorns. It's nice to pull those out with getting those thorns stuck in your hand. Or if you don't want dirt underneath your fingernails, those gloves are really nice to have as well to protect your hands. Some other things that are nice to have is maybe just an additional fertilizer. Again, if your soil needs it, so you want to get a soil test to make sure the soil needs the fertilizer, but you can always give it a little extra nutrition if you feel it's necessary. So lastly, it's nice to have 2 stakes with a string tied on either end. So what I like to do is to take one stake and I put it on one end of the garden. I walk to the other end of the garden and put the stake in on the other end, and then that string makes a nice straight line. Along that line is where I will hoe my row to plant plants, or my transplants or seeds, what have you. So I use my ridge hoe along the string to make that nice straight row. That's not necessary. The plants will grow just the same if they're not in a straight row. So it's not necessarily to have those sorts of things, but it is nice to have. So it's important to know that there are tons of garden tools and tons of garden products available to consumers when starting a garden, but it's also important to know that you don't need every single one. There are tools that we mentioned that are extremely helpful to get started, and then there are other tools that are nice to have. If you're just getting started, let's stick with the basics. Get the needed tools, get the shovel, get your rakes, things of that nature to really get your garden started. And then as you progress as a gardener, maybe upgrade some of your tools once you're ready to do so. So that's it for this week's video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Be sure to like and comment on this post, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook.